Hey, this is Cam. Welcome back to part two with KenTay Lee. I hope you got a chance to see the first part, the first YouTube episode. But welcome back, KenTay. When we left, we were just talking about how we met and your early part of your life, and then your incarceration, and then how we met through a church program at Western Youth Institute. One of the things that I think is ironic is you shared when you were young, you didn't like to be touched. And you had this thing that hindered some of your schoolwork. But one of the things I remember is I would come up to Western Youth on Sunday nights to visit you, and you would hug me and almost break my ribs when we were, at the end of the time. We'd eat, that group would eat together.
Yeah.
I remember coming home saying, he hugged me so hard. I mean, I could just feel your hug for a long time. So just that embrace always just resonated.
So yeah, I had lived an entire life where I had not known kindness and love, and that's hard to understand. It's hard to understand extreme poverty even in America, but it exists. It's rare, but it exists. And so I'm meeting you for the first time at a time where I can actually reach out and hug. It took me a long time to do that. I'm meeting you at a time where I was taught that our enemy were white people, that the police were our enemy. And so all of this stuff that I had learned through my life, it had been transformed. It had completely been turned over because now I could actually understand what kindness was. And so, yeah, Cam, I was gonna hold on to you for dear life, man.
Me too.
I had been waiting my whole life to hug somebody, and I'm always deliberate in my love. So it was just like, yeah, man, I really, I remember that, man.
So how many, can you tell me how many different prisons you were in the 21 years? So Western Youth Institute, what other places were you?
I was in Western Youth Institution, and they sent me to the exact opposite, they sent me to Western Youth, Foothills, Pascatank. I went from Pascatank to Warren. I had to do long term. I went from Warren to Bertie. I went from Bertie to Columbus. I went from Columbus to Tabor City, from Tabor City to Columbus, and I left from Columbus and went to the county jail. Yeah, it may be one or two in there that I forgot.
Yeah. Which was the worst?
So I went from Western Youth to Foothills, which initially was a shock, but it wasn't that bad. It was still geared toward youth and learning, and it was a good atmosphere. But when I got to Pascatank,
which Foothills is across the street, right?
It's right across.
Yeah, you right across the street from Western Youth Institute for people, and it's been torn down. They blew it up the last couple of years. But it's like 10 stories or 9 stories high. It was the high rise.
16 stories.
Oh, Foothills was the adult prison across the street.
Oh, yeah. So that was like 2 or 3 stories. It's small, but it's a big, massive prison.
Yeah.
But when I got to the tank, that's what they call it, the tank, Pasco tank. We were on the bus, we were getting off. The captain himself said, if you don't have a knife, you need to get one before you get to the unit. How you do that, I have no idea. But he said, you need to get one before you get to the unit. Don't know where you've come from, but, and they was calling like a emergency code as we were getting off the bus. Somebody had, something had happened on the yard that you could see from the bus. So there's this big stuff happening. We're on the bus. This is our first adult prison.
Hey,
this is my first
laughing.
Man, Cam, look, this is my first adult prison. So I am literally off of a youth camp. Youth camps are different, fundamentally different from adult camps. So we're on the bus and this is happening. We are absolutely not terrified, but we are sort of like, okay, we're going to have to prepare ourselves here. So we're going to really have to be ready. So that was so different. It was so dirty. It was so violent, and it was like, at the time, it was one of those prisons that was inmate run. So you have officers that work there, but they don't work. They don't work for you. They work for their paychecks and they go home. We're not going to risk our lives for your life. Is the rhetoric that you have. It is every man for himself, and you need to figure out how to navigate this. So immediately when I walk in the block, a group of guys come straight up to me. They can tell that we're young, we're green. They can look at us and tell that we do not belong there. We have not been here. We're not experienced with this. And so as this is happening, it absolutely, they walk up, they say, "Hey brother, let me help you with your property. Man, you get up here in this room." So I get in the room. It's wintertime. The window's cut out. There's no window. So this is weird. I say, okay, it's cold. I can see my breath in the room. So the guys pull in the room. They're like, "Man, first question they ask you, where you from?" "I'm from Charlotte." They say, "Do you bang?" "No." "Okay." And so they just started to introduce you to, okay, this man lives here, this man lives here, this man lives here, and this man lives here. These are the people you're gonna need to know. If you need any help with anything, you just let us know. And then a man just hands me something. He hands me a bag of stuff. "Here you go, brother. That's yours." I immediately get back to him. "No, I don't need it. I got my own stuff. I came with my own stuff. I know you don't take stuff from people in prison. So you can have that back." He was like, "Nah, you're going to need all of that. So you just go ahead and keep it. That's yours." And so this is my first day at the tank. And I am absolutely flabbergasted. But by this time, I'm a believing man. I believe in God. I had been serving God for a number of years. So this is different. And so now I immediately know that just because you believe in God does not mean that people are not going to try you. And so it's going to happen at some point. People want to know who you are and what you're going to do. And it was just totally different, Cam. It was a war zone.
How long were you there?
I was at Pastor Tank from 2007 to 2009.
2 years. Wow.
2 years.
Other than Western Youth and Foothills, would you say any of them, which was the best experience for you, if there is such a thing?
I'm going to say Foothills was the best place for me to grow, was the best place for me to learn, was the best place for me to root in me the value system that I had, the value system. And that was important down the line, because had I not had that value system at that time, I would have been into any and everything. But I went to Pastor Tank and I went to these places knowing that I would not be a gang member. I went knowing that I would not get into the sexuality of prison. I went knowing that I was not willing to do the things to survive in prison that other people were doing. Because when you got to the tank, it's like a very totally different world. So it's every man for himself.
So tell me, you said the guards had that experience. Did the guards, did you ever have a place where you thought the guards treated you well?
That's a hard one, because there's a culture that comes with prison that's just violent. There's a culture in prison that is just segregated. And so segregation lasted all the way up until like 2018 in prison. Segregation was a place, but it was a real concept in prison. So I actually lived in segregation. I actually did about 6 years, on and off in segregation. I had those times where it was extremely hard.
For the people listening, explain segregation.
Okay, so segregation is what we would term to be solitary confinement. But it's different in North Carolina because it is a pattern of the SHU program from out in California, but the SHU program on a smaller scale. So they just matched what they did with the shoe program in California, but they just gave you your own cell, 23 in 1. So you didn't really come out. If you came out, you were supposed to come out for an hour, right? It sounds good, don't it? No. So when it rains outside, you don't get wrecked. When it's cold outside, you don't get wrecked. When the officer's tired, you don't get wrecked. So 23 in 1 is like 23 in 2 hours, maybe a week, if you're lucky. So yeah, that it's a segregation is food through the trap.
And you spent 6 years?
On and off. I spent 6 years on and off. So I would do 60 days here. I would do 6 months here. I would do 8 months here. I would do 9 months here. And those would accumulate to being about 6 years in time. Yeah.
Wow. So, and again, so I would come visit you at Tabor City and we would talk about, and that was a huge prison that looked like it was very, to tell the group, tell the group, what was a typical day at Tabor City? What did you do?
So Tabor City, which we never knew this place existed until I went to this prison. Tabor City is in the middle. It's like adjacent to Whitesville. There's a town in North Carolina called Whitesville. It's called Whitesville because, of course, historically, it was a place that was dominated by white people, and that culture still exists. And so you have predominantly Indian and African Americans who are there running it, but they are every bit of the citizens of Whitesville. And so the culture at Tabor City is so racist, so violent that you literally like, okay, so you could literally be walking down the hall to Chow. You could brush up against the yellow line and you could go to segregation for 60 days. So this is the culture of Tabor City. Tabor City is the one prison in North Carolina that if you ask any inmate who's done any time in the North Carolina prison system in the last 10 years, they will tell you that Tabor City is the worst prison in North Carolina. Not because of the inmates, but because of the officers. And so it's very violent. It's very conditioned to restrict you. They want to hurt you. They want to punish you. They want for you, because it has the reputation of getting all of the inmates that nobody likes. No other prison wants.
Yeah, but you got good meals. The food was probably really good in prison, wasn't it? Didn't you get good meals?
Cam, don't do that. Don't do that on this camera. Tell us
about the meals.
Okay, so the food is so nasty that you actually have to pick and choose what you eat. You need to be careful with what you eat out of the kitchen. It's the food in prison is okay. So you're adult meal. So we get what amounts to the same amount of food that they feed in middle school. We get a middle school lunch. We get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you put it all together, it may be 1 or 1.5, maybe 2 meals. Yeah, so you have to have some type of commissary canteen to supplement these meals, or you are definitely going to lose weight, or just feel like you're starving the whole time. But the food is terrible, man. It's horrible.
So share with us how you kept yourself physically fit in that. You probably had exercise rooms, nice exercise rooms.
No.
No.
So all you have is your cell and the recreation area, what we call the yard, is like a tuna can with a fence around it. And so it is cut off, it's segregated. So you can only go with your unit. And so you would be only with those people. 24 hours a day. To put it in perspective, we would have about maybe close to, it would be 100 people in one pod. Each man is double celled. So we would have maybe about 600 people in a yard that's less than 100 yards by 25 yards. If that can sort of like put it in perspective for you. So it's smaller than a football field, but we have 600 people all trying to use 2 calisthenics machines, pull-up bars, dip bars, and push-up stations. That's all we have. And they installed those while I was there. So we didn't have anything but a basketball court. And I'm sorry, if you can't play basketball, you can't play on that court. I'm sorry. You have to be the best in prison to play on that court, because for some reason, everybody on the court should have been in the NBA. So, yeah, you can't play on that court. So in order for you to exercise, you really have to.
Same at the YMCA.
And listen,
the YMCA.
I can't, come on, Cam. No, they're not doing that at the YMCA.
Everybody at the Y thinks they should have been in the NBA at some time. I'm sorry.
We're going to have to change that culture. We're going to change that culture at the Y. Because we need to be all inclusive. We need for everybody to get exercise here. We need everybody to be healthy. But
when I would visit, KenTay would always share about how he kept it. You would take care of your body physically and how you would try to eat better in prison. And so, how old are you now?
I'm 36 years old.
But you would tell me that you were the old man in prison.
Oh yeah, so after you hit, most inmates do an average of 3 to 5 years. That probably pushed up a little bit to about 7 to 9 years with the length of sentences. But when I hit about 10 to 15 years in prison, that immediately put me in a category in prison. I was the old head. We call them the old coons. And so the old coons set the tone for everybody who's learning how to do time. We know how to do time. There are rules, principles, laws, and politics. And so this is very interesting about prison.
Fix your phone. There you go.
Yeah, this is very interesting about the culture of prison, because it's a status. The more time you do, the further you go in prison. And the further you go in doing that time in a certain way, the more status you receive. And so when I hit about 15 years, I became the old head. I became the person who would explain to the young guys what was permissible and what wasn't. I would have to be the go-between between the gang members and the civilians. That's what we call them. You have gang members and you have civilians. And then you have somebody like me who was the liaison. So I would be in between them, and I would say, okay, gang members, don't kill them. Let me teach them. And I'm going to take him with me. And so now the political climate, those who would learn, who would be the ones who would know, who would actually be like sort of the power structure in prison. We would all have a united front. So we would have to say, okay, we're going to live like this, and we're not going to do this. And that united front was like a real wall, a real go-between. This is the real boundary. So they're the police, they have their threat, but we have the united front threat. And so we become the, so to speak, the police of the inmates. We become and it's not that we're policing ourselves, but we're making sure that we're governing ourselves accordingly. And we will have to teach them. We will have to guide them in doing prison, because when most people are in crisis, they feel that they can do and say and conduct themselves in any way. But in prison, there happens to be people in prison who just don't care about crisis. They don't care about people and where they are in life. And so we would be the ones that would train, teach, and organize the young men. And I'm a good guy, so we're not doing anything violent. We're not doing anything crazy. We're just teaching them the policies. We would write their grievances for them. We would teach them how to go in between the guards and the inmates. Just the little things that you need to know to survive in prison if you're going to make it. And so
but prison is about rehabilitation and helping you get out of there and survive. Weren't they rehabilitating you?
Prison is not about rehabilitation. Prison is about punishment. It's about retribution. It's about taking people who are unworthy of society and letting them know exactly how unworthy they are. So prison will take every single piece of property that you have. They will put you in a room with no clothing. They won't give you any tissue, and they will leave you in there for 3 days straight. It's about destroying any hope of resistance to power. It's authoritarianism. So this is like a country that is ran by a tyrant. And it is implemented in just that way. You know exactly what's going on. Now, people outside of prison, they don't get this. You can't hear this as public because nothing's public in prison. It is private. Everything is kept inside of prison. What happens in prison stays in prison. You could literally die in prison and your family would not know until they ask. And so prison is not about rehabilitation. It's about a culture of violence. It is about a culture of, so to put it in perspective, you have guards who work there who most likely don't have many other opportunities, who most likely can't see any other opportunity for employment. But this is the most lucrative, best opportunity that is happening. It is opening up jobs for thousands of people. And absolutely like one go. So now everybody who had not had jobs for many, many years are now employed, and they are now in charge of other people. And very rarely trained. They just go through maybe a day and a half of training. They're given weapons, they're given instructions, and they're sent in. I literally met an officer one time who asked me what to do. He said, well, when I'm supposed to go to break? I said, man, I don't work here, man. You know I'm in prison, right? You know I'm an inmate. He said, man, but they didn't tell me anything. I said, okay, man, go talk to your sergeant. Come on, let's walk down here. Let me take you to your sergeant.
KenTay.
I can't just sit there and have that conversation with you while I'm trying to get my stuff done during the day. So let me help you out so we can just keep this going. And if you need any other help, just come get me. If you can't find your sergeant, I'll help. So, yeah, they literally will put people in there.
So, and then I want to transition as we end up part two, we transition and sit back and show your shirt again, the Just Mercy.
Oh yeah, because this has a lot of meaning for me.
Yeah, because Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative, if you haven't seen the movie Just Mercy about Bryan Stevenson, you need to see it. But that group got involved with you, KenTay, and got involved with his case. And that's really the one of the great stories that we'll share and talk more about in part three. But at 5 years ago, did you have hope that you would get out, or were you at any point did you just resign yourself? This is it. I'm going to die here.
So yeah, I hit a place in life where they had denied all three of my appeals. The United States Supreme Court had validated my sentence. They had actually said that this was due process and there is nothing else that we can do. And at that point in life, that was a devastating blow, because the only thing that I could hope for in life was that maybe one day I would be free. Maybe one day I would be able to redeem myself in the eyes of society, that, you know, the messages that I had been told my whole life, that, you know, I was unworthy of society, that I was a criminal, that I was the worst, which I had never lived up to that. Like, I could never like live up to the worst. Like, I wasn't even like a bad inmate, like when it came to other inmates. So like the other inmates knew. So like I would teach them algebra and teach them how to read and teach them to get their GED. So I wasn't really the bad guy here, you know, but the culture was just that, you know, I hit a slump at one point where I said, you know, I can either be miserable or I can decide to use the time that I have in the best way that I can. And at some point, my mind switched. My mind said, regardless of where I am, I have to live. I have to learn to live the fullest life that I can live, to be the best person I could be. I knew that I would be good. I knew that I was good initially. And that never changed in me. I knew that I could never accept just doing any and everything just because I was in prison or I was a prisoner. Because honestly, having life without parole gives you permission to live in any kind of way that you want. You could actually just do anything you wanted and people would expect that of you. It wouldn't be anything different than what they expected. but I knew that I was good. So I started to train myself to just educate. I immersed myself in reading and writing. I would write letters to professors. We would correspond. They refused to allow me to go to college, and that infuriated me so much that I actually found, and EJI helped me find professors who would correspond with me about topics of politics and just all philosophy, all type of subjects. And I sort of just immersed myself in those. I found my identity in those. I found that I could learn these things, and not only learn them, I could articulate them. I could actually write about them. And I began to discover that, oh, there's something here. I'm actually learning these things. I actually got to a point. It was hard. So you have ups and downs. You're depressed. You're anxious. You go through those seasons. But I remember there was this one algebra book. They would not let me take college courses. There was this one algebra book that was in the library. It was beginning college algebra. So I said to myself, I can do college algebra. They won't let me take college courses. I'll teach myself. I literally checked this book out and refused to give it back for about 3 years. Because it took 3 years to go through that book, that textbook. And every time they would search me and take the book, I would go right back to the library and get the same book and keep the book as long as I could until they took it again. And I worked my way all the way through that textbook. And I learned the curriculum of algebra. An interesting story after that. I got accepted to Troy University like a couple months after I got out. And I audited a algebra course in their class. It was and the only reason that I didn't get 100 on it was because I had to navigate the internet. It was an online course. Yeah. And I was still learning to type. I was still learning to text. I was still learning all of that stuff. But I actually had a passing grade at the end of that course. And all of the other subjects, English, dictionaries that I read, words, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, the words in the Bible and how they was used in the context of them. I immersed myself in these things. And awesome. Now I realize now how much of a difference it is in my education and people who actually are in universities right now.
Yeah, you're self-taught. I mean, again, you go in at 14, illiterate. You get yourself to read to where you're at, and that's impressive. You got a wonderful story. I appreciate everybody taking the time to watch part 2 of this. Share it with your friends. Share KenTay's story, and then come back for part 3, where we're going to talk about Equal Justice Initiative and how they work to get KenTay out, and then what you've been doing and your dreams and hopes for the future. So again, thank you everybody for taking up, and KenTay, thank you again for part 2, and come back for part 3.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you for that.